Regular Chinese poker is a great game, but most people who start playing open-faced Chinese never go back. In this video, we'll show you the two most common ways to play, regular OFC and pineapple. Regular open-faced Chinese can be played with 2, 3, or 4 players, but if you're playing pineapple, 3's the max. We'll tell you why in a second. Just like in closed Chinese poker, you don't use poker chips and there's no betting or raising. It's a point game, and before you start, everyone has to agree on a point value, like $1 a point, and then you can just keep score using a notepad. The final objective in OFC is to arrange 13 cards into 3 poker hands, just like in regular closed Chinese poker. One hand will have 3 cards and it has to be the weakest hand of the 3. It's called the top hand. The second hand has 5 cards and has to be better than the top hand. It's called the middle hand. The third hand also has 5 cards and it has to be better than both other hands. It's called the bottom hand. If your final hand doesn't follow these rules, you foul and lose all 3 hands. The difference between regular Chinese poker and open-faced Chinese poker is that you don't get to see all of your cards at the beginning of the hand, which makes it a lot easier to foul. First, deal everyone 5 cards. OFC is played with a dealer button, and if there are more than 2 players, the action moves clockwise around the table starting to the left of the dealer. After each hand, the dealer button moves 1 spot to the left, just like in Texas Hold'em. Starting with the player to the left of the dealer, each player chooses how to set their first 5 cards to start building 3 poker hands. After everyone set their first 5 cards, players take turns drawing cards and adding them to their hands. In straight open-faced Chinese, each player draws 1 card at a time and adds it to their hand. But in pineapple, each player draws 3 cards at a time, chooses 2 to add to their hand, and 1 to discard face down. Since you draw so many more cards in pineapple, the game moves more quickly, it's way easier to make big hands, and you don't foul nearly as much. It's also why you can't play with more than 3 people. When all the cards are set, it's scored just like regular Chinese poker. Each player compares each of their hands against their opponents. Each hand is worth a point, and if you win all 3, it's called a scoop and you get a 3-point bonus. If you win 2 and lose 1, you net a win of 1 point. If you lose 2 and win 1, you net a loss of 1 point. And if you lose all 3, you lose 6 points. But on top of the regular scoring, there's also what are called royalties. Royalties are bonuses for making big hands, and different people play different royalties, so that's another thing you need to agree on before the game starts. Big hands are always worth more if you have them in the middle or top hand. For example, trips might be worth 0 points if you have it in your bottom hand, 2 points in the middle, and up to 22 points if you have them in your top hand. The last concept you need to learn is called Fantasyland, and it's played in both regular open-faced Chinese and pineapple. Basically, if you make a pair of queens or better in your top hand without fouling, you go to Fantasyland on the following hand. When you're in Fantasyland, you get to see all of your cards at once at the beginning of the hand, which gives you a huge advantage. To make it even worse for your opponent, they have to set their hand blind without seeing any of your cards first. The only difference between regular OFC and pineapple is that in pineapple Fantasyland, you get 14 cards instead of 13, one of which you must choose to discard. To stay in Fantasyland, you have to get either trips in your top hand, or a full house in your middle hand, or quads or better in your bottom hand. When the game's done, compare scores and settle up with each of your opponents according to the point value you agreed on before. PokerListings.com, the all-in poker guide.